You know, being a horror movie villain, it's an art, okay? There's a reason we remember names like John Kramer and Hannibal Lecter, because they put the work in. So, the fact that there's so many villains out there who don't put the work in is deeply frustrating. So much so that we have a second list on this very topic. So don't forget to check out the first one. I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture Horror, and here are 10 more horror movie villains who were completely unprepared. Number 10. West and his soldiers, 28 days later. Receiving rave reviews and producing a spectacular commercial return, Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later is credited by many critics with revitalizing the zombie genre. The Cillian Murphy-led outing also features one of the more underprepared villains in recent memory. Christopher Eccleston's Major Henry West initially appears to be a beacon of hope in the nightmarish world of the Rage virus, offering sanctuary to the film's core group of survivors. However, West and his renegade soldiers are soon revealed to be an abhorrent cohort of rapists using a radio broadcast to ensnare female survivors into sexual slavery to repopulate the world. Unsurprisingly, Murphy's protagonist Jim opposes this appalling plan, prompting West to order his execution. Unfortunately for Eccleston's charge, he and his men demonstrate an abject lack of preparation for just how viciously Jim fights back. Not only do his bumbling cronies fail to prevent the unarmed Jim from escaping, but Murphy's character also manages to lure the supposedly savvy Major away from his compound with ease. This allows him to unleash Private Miller, an infected soldier chained up for medical observations, upon the remaining soldiers. West caps off his incompetency by failing to do away with our heroes at point-blank range after popping up in the backseat of their escape vehicle. Henry is dispatched after Naomi Harris's Selena puts the car in reverse, allowing an enraged Miller to seize the cretinous soldier through the back window. Number 9. Seth Brundle The Fly. Regrettably for Seth Brundle, 1986's The Fly underlines that being a brilliant scientist and an excellent forward planner are apparently mutually exclusive traits. The primary subject of David Cronenberg's iconic sci-fi horror outing, Brundle is a ferociously intelligent individual. His genius-level intellect is highlighted by his creation of a pair of pods that are capable of teleporting inanimate objects between them. Live objects are not so lucky, as a baboon discovers, much to its chagrin, when the process turns the creature inside out. Brundle eventually realizes that his pods are creating a copy of the original object as opposed to teleporting it, allowing him to tweak the formula and render his machine capable of transporting creatures comprised of biological tissue. Unfortunately for Jeff Goldblum's character, he miserably fails to adequately account for any sort of malfunction with his invention. This lack of foresight is even more egregious in light of the fact that he was more than aware of the appalling danger associated with transporting living beings. A drunken Brundle eventually teleports himself, blissfully unaware of the fact that a housefly has entered the machine with him. The scientist's abject lack of preparation for this perilous experiment costs him dearly. Brundle begins to morph into a grotesque human-fly hybrid, precipitating his slide into villainous territory and ultimately costing him his life. Number 8. Sheilo Hunter Fall. Hang on a moment, isn't Virginia Gardner's Sheilo Hunter one of literally only 2 protagonists featured throughout the entirety of 2022's Fall? We got that right? No? Okay. Notwithstanding the adrenaline junkie's relentlessly irritating alter ego, Danger D, Sheilo is a pillar of support to Grace Curry's Becky. She attempts to break her friend out of a depressive spiral caused by her husband Dan's death, encouraging Becky to join her in climbing a 2,000-foot tall decommissioned television tower. Except not really. Hear this takeout. In actuality, Sheilo is a villain through and through. Not only did she leave her dearest friend to languish at the bottom of a bottle for a year after her appalling trauma, Fall reveals that Sheilo actually had a 4-month affair with Dan that only ended shortly before his marriage to Becky. Rubbing salt in the wounds, Hunter even has a 143 tattoo, a numeric code that Dan used to tell Becky that he loved her. Accordingly, the revelation of just how underprepared this duplicitous woman was for the film's perilous ascent just adds insult to the injury. Not only did she fail to charge her drone fully, or bring a satellite phone with her, Sheilo completely failed to implement any form of contingency plan for the very likely event that this hazardous climb went to shit. If you're gonna have an affair with your best friend's husband, don't needlessly endanger their life as an encore. Number 7. The Animatronic Mascots, Willy's Wonderland. Following his vengeful turns in the likes of Mandy and Pig, it should be an established rule of thumb by this point: do not with Nicolas Cage. Unfortunately for the animatronic mascots featured in Willy's Wonderland, they were clearly unfamiliar with the inimitable actor's reputation for going postal on anyone foolish enough to cross his path. The 2021 horror comedy sees the American take on the role of a drifter employed as a night janitor for an abandoned family entertainment centre. The only issue? His bosses failed to mention that the amusement park's animatronic mascots are possessed by the souls of a cannibalistic killer and his deranged acolytes. Cage's protagonist is the latest in a long line of drifters offered up as sacrifices to appease the psychotic mascots. Despite the odds being seemingly stacked against the initially unassuming janitor, the mascots soon realise they have bitten off more than they can chew when he fights back with all the reserve of a rabid saber-toothed tiger. Cage dispatches his purported tormentors in comically brutal fashion, with his curb-stomping of Gus Gorilla using a urinal serving as a particularly gruesome highlight. In all fairness to our unfortunate villains, can anyone ever be adequately prepared for the cinematic enigma that is Nicolas Cage? Number 6. The Collector, The Collection. In many respects, it's entirely unfair to bestow the label of completely unprepared upon the twisted individual known as the Collector. The antagonistic force behind Marcus Dunstan's pair of horror outings, the Collector is a masked and murderous psychopath. As meticulous as he is deadly, this unhinged individual collects one person from every household he attacks, brutally murdering any remaining occupants. Remarkably, collection is even less desirable. The murderer experiments on his victims, arranging their body parts to resemble insects. Unfortunately for the Collector, he didn't take into account just how vengeful his vile mission statement could make any surviving victims. Joss Stewart's Arkan is collected in the first film, but freed in the early goings of 2012's sequel. To say that he's unwilling to let bygones be bygones would be an understatement of the century. A status quo that the Collector ultimately proves completely unprepared for. The climactic sequence of The Collection sees Arkan track down the villain by researching every entomologist within a 200-mile radius of the killer's most recent spree. The Collector's failure to account for this eventuality has the direst of consequences for this monstrous individual. Arkan gleefully monologues about his plans to torture and kill his former tormentor before locking him in a similar trunk to the one he once found himself captive in. Number 5. Billy Loomis and Stu Macher, Scream. The problem with an elaborate monologue that lays out the intricate details of a wicked scheme, the character doing the talking looks exceedingly stupid if they find the tables turned on themselves. For an iconic example in this vein, look no further than 1996's Scream. Wes Craven's slasher sees the film's villains initially carry out a legitimately Machiavellian plot. The movie's climactic showdown sees the depraved duo of Stu Macher and Billy Loomis unveiled as the minds behind Ghostface, a development that hits even closer to home considering that Loomis happens to be the boyfriend of lead protagonist Sidney Prescott. Regrettably for these would-be murderous masterminds, the pair exhibit a complete lack of preparation to finish carrying out their mandate with a slide into Bond villain territory. With Sidney at their mercy, the pair begin gleefully monologuing like cartoon baddies as they outline their evil plan in its entirety, as opposed to simply killing her and getting away scot-free. Don't break a hand patting yourself on the back, boys. Accordingly, the bumbling psychopaths are completely unprepared for the eventual return of Courtney Cox's Gale Weathers when the reporter unexpectedly arrives to save the day. This development allows Sidney to gain the upper hand, turning Stu's head into a meat pancake by dropping a television set on it before she and Gale gun down her duplicitous boyfriend. That is, of course, if you believe that Stu Macher did, in fact, die. Number 4. Wrote, Wait Until Dark. 1967's Wait Until Dark may be more of a psychological thriller than a fully fledged horror movie, but it's still plenty terrifying. With the climax acclaimed as one of the scariest scenes in cinematic history, and taking the fact that it's cinema icon Audrey Hepburn doing the ass-kicking into account, Terence Young's nail-biting offering is a worthy inclusion for this list. Hepburn plays Susie Hendricks, a blind woman who is terrorized by a trio of thugs searching for a heroin-stuffed doll that they believe to be in her possession. The criminals are led by Alan Arkin's Rote, initially using Susie's blindness against her by posing as different individuals to win her trust. However, once their ruse is exposed, Rote simply isn't ready for Hendrix's visceral levels of opposition. After Arkin's villain kills his cronies and threatens to burn her properties down, Susie uses her condition to her advantage by plunging her apartment into darkness. Rote attempts to use the matchlight to pierce the gloom are swiftly foiled when Hendrix douses him in gasoline. She also smashes all of the house's light bulbs to prevent him from being able to see. When he eventually captures her by using the fridge's internal light, Susie is ultimately able to unplug the device. Using the pitch black to help dispatch her foe, it's Rote lying dead on the floor when the dust finally settles. You picked the wrong house, buddy. Number 3, the Leas Family, Ready or Not. It's supremely ironic that a family in the business of hunting and sacrificing new members is as woefully unprepared as the Leas in 2019's brilliant Ready or Not. Having just wed Mark O'Brien's Alex, the film follows Samara Weaving's Grace as she is pursued by her new husband's relatives. The Leas carry out this ritual every time one of their number marries, the result of a Faustian bargain between one of their ancestors and Satan. Failure to sacrifice their prey means that their insidious tribe dies instead. Lamentably for these sinister devil worshippers, the Leas' lack of preparation is twofold. They initially fail to account for just how formidable an adversary Grace proves to be, with Weaving's protagonist consistently outmaneuvering her opposition across the course of the movie, despite being hunted within the confines of the family's ancestral mansion. More concerningly, Ready or Not's antagonists are also completely unaware of a disillusioned member within their own ranks. Adam Brody's Daniel Leas is duly revealed to have become sickened by his family's abhorrent practices over the years, leading him to consistently undermine their efforts to ritually sacrifice Grace until his death in the chaotic climactic sequences. What should have been a case of shooting fish in a barrel instead concludes with the surviving Leas family members exploding after failing to achieve their grisly mandate. Dismal preparation all around. Number 2, the home invaders don't breathe. Stephen Lang's Norman Nordstrom may be the overarching antagonist of 2016's Don't Breathe, but the label of villain is more than appropriate for 3 delinquent thieves who intend to rob a blind veteran in the dead of night. To state that the thieves in question, Rocky, Money, and Alex, are woefully underprepared for the adversity they duly face in the confines of Nordstrom's house is like stating you might get slightly burned if you stood next to a nuclear bomb as it exploded. Street smart the trio may be, but this burglary proves to be a whole new ballgame. Nordstrom may be unable to see, but this proves to have heightened his other senses to their absolute maximum, a terrifying state of affairs complemented by the aid of his vicious Rottweiler. As such, this contest is akin to 3 hamsters taking on a mountain lion, a reality that is hammered home by the shocking ease with which Norman dispatches Money and Alex. While the film's conclusion does see Jane Levy's Rocky actually make it out of this metaphorical shark tank alive, this is more due to dumb luck as opposed to any significant preparation. Number 1, the aliens, Signs. Signs is unequivocally regarded as one of M. Night Shyamalan's finest offerings to date. As such, it's hard to escape a heavy sense of irony when one considers that his 2002 sci-fi horror outing features extraterrestrial invaders possessing what is contentiously the worst plan for world domination of all time. The second act of Signs reveals that water proves toxic to Shyamalan's antagonistic aliens. Let that sink in for a second. In a universe that potentially plays hosts to millions of planets, these interplanetary visitors decided to pick the one where around 3/4 of the surface is covered with a substance that is literally their kryptonite. To make matters infinitesimally more foolhardy, the same deathly substance rains from the sky on a regular basis, representing the equivalent of a human being being taken to a hydrochloric acid shower for Signs villains. It literally beggars belief that a group of individuals who are apparently capable of intergalactic travel failed to send down a probe to make sure that this little rock called Earth represented a solid return for their investment. Based on the forward planning on display, it would not come as an almighty surprise to discover that the alien supreme leader was actually Jar Jar Binks. That is everything for this list. As I say, make sure you go back and check our first list, because there really is quite a lot of dumb villains out there. I have been Sean for What Culture Horror, and you can follow us over on Twitter at What Culture Horror. You can follow myself at Sean Ferrick as well. Look after yourself until I'm talking to you again. Do a bit more preparation than these did, because you really don't want to find yourself on one of these lists. Thanks very much, folks. Bye.